Well, for since the coup in Ukraine in 2014, which saw um, far right neo-Nazi powers come to power in Ukraine, and which saw for the next 8 years not only the repression of the Ukrainian people, journalists, people who spoke out, people who didn't like this neo-Nazi type government, but also for the past 8 years, the shelling of the people of Donbass, who are Russian speaking, identify culturally as Russian. And when they saw the crimes that were happening in Kiev and later in Odessa, where 42 people were massacred, at least 42, that's the minimum number, in the fire in the trade house, which was deliberately this was a deliberate massacre, and it still has not been investigated by Ukrainian authorities. When the people in the Donbass saw that, Donbass being eastern Ukraine, they said, "We don't want that coming to us. We want to be autonomous." And since that point, the Ukrainian forces, again with neo-Nazi forces in them, neo-Nazi battalions, have been shelling relentlessly the people of Donbass. So this has been going on for 8 years, and we haven't heard any Western condemnation of that, of the thousands of civilians in the Donbass who have been killed. But now, suddenly, when Russia decides, okay, enough is enough, Russia has for years pushed for a diplomatic resolution to the issue of the Donbass and Ukraine. And in fact, I think it was 2019, Russia put forth, I can't remember the exact term, a bill, a process to denazify Ukraine. Ukraine and the U.S. did not agree with that. So that's one notable point, that the West has been supporting these neo-Nazis in Ukraine, including Canada. Um, and, right now there's a whole lot of outcry about Russia having currently waged an operation in Ukraine to denazify Ukraine. But the people who are crying, the general public, I get the sense that, number one, they don't have any idea that the Ukrainian army and neo-Nazi battalions have been warring upon the people of the Donbass, killing them, including children, shooting at schools, targeting civilian infrastructure. And number two, I guess they're just simply not aware of these neo-Nazi factions within Ukraine, because I don't see how any logical, rational, empathetic person could ever support what's happening in Ukraine.
Well, I think the fact is the mainstream media, as you've pointed out there, they don't report this. Like, so what you've said there, that doesn't come on our screens here
No.
in the UK at all.
No, in 2019, and I must say, on my own dime, as I do all my reporting, I went to the Donbass for just under 3 weeks, and I went to frontline areas. I went to villages that were 500 meters from these Ukrainian forces, and that were being shelled on a nightly basis. And also during the day. And I spoke with the remaining residents, and those were generally the ones I met were elderly who had nowhere to go, no means of fleeing the area. So they were subject to the daily and nightly shelling and heavy machine gun firing of the Ukrainian forces. And this is not being reported. And also, for people who aren't aware, in like 2014 or 2015, there were accords signed in Minsk, and these prohibited the use of heavy weaponry from either side, and Ukraine has continually and consistently violated that by using heavy weapons against the people of the Donbass. In one village I went to, I spoke with the village administrator, I think her position was, who told me they haven't known a moment's peace since this began. None of the truce accords ever reached that village. It's called Zaitsevo, if people want to look it up. And she was just stressing, she sees firsthand what's happening, because she taught herself to drive so she could go there to the place that's just been targeted and document it, because nobody else is doing that except for, of course, local journalists. And she said essentially they're taking apart the houses one by one. They do a line of houses, then they go to the next street and they destroy them. And when I was there, I saw a house that was still smoldering from an attack 2 days ago. It was completely gutted. And these are regions there are people still living, and they're being attacked by Ukrainian forces. And the body that was mandated to document it, the OSCE, has it turns a blind eye to these war crimes of Ukraine.